If you're a boxing fan, or even just a sports fan in general, then you're likely aware of the infamous hand wrap scandal surrounding the former welterweight champion Antonio Margarito.
It was bad. I mean, his face was busted up, and that's when people had suspicions.
It's a story that's been covered by pretty much every sports media outlet on the internet and has attracted millions of speculative viewers on YouTube. It's a dark spot for boxing, a shadowed gloom over a sport that has to constantly fight for its legitimacy amongst the mainstream due to the simple brutality that is the very nature of prize fighting.
And boxing is predicated on violence.
The sport doesn't need it, and the fans are disgusted by it. Yet, at least in Margarito's case, there was some sense of justice served with the scale of expose that followed in the direct aftermath, which unfortunately cannot be said for the fighter that I'll be scrutinizing today. In fact, despite this fight being relatively fresh in the minds of hardcore boxing fans, it has, for whatever reason, been brushed under the blood-stained mat, with barely a forum thread in the last decade discussing what appears surface value evidence of cheating. Today, that comes to a halt as we document one of the most controversial fights of the 21st century, the untold story of Catley versus Thobela, on this episode of BLTV After Dark.
We've actually proven this forensically beyond all reasonable doubt that the bandages Thobela had on the night was loaded.
We should warn you, this is not for the faint of heart. What you're about to see is brutal at best.
First, I have to say that many of the claims in this video are alleged. I'm simply relaying the evidence that I found on the internet regarding this controversy. I'll do my best to make it clear when I'm citing evidence from the few sparse media sources available and when I'm giving my own personal opinion, which in this case will be on the fight film itself because, yes, the controversial contest is available on the internet. This isn't some story of two club fighters scrapping away in a local bar. This was an actual world title fight between two top-rated fighters, and it was broadcast on a major TV network. Who were the fighters involved? Well, a few die-hard Brits will likely remember this guy.
Totally addicted to bass. Totally addicted to bass.
Glenn Catley was one of Britain's strongest, most resilient, and hard-working fighters in the late 90s. He made up for what he lacked in punch resistance with solid fundamentals, brutal punching power, and a strong will to win.
Chance in this ringside to introduce you to a highly touted young light middleweight by the name of Glenn Catley.
It's not a name that'll be overly familiar to boxing fans today, likely because he rose to prominence chasing the shadows of British super middleweight legends Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn, and then was preceded by the illustrious Joe Calzaghe and Carl the Cobra Froch. Catley first caught the eye of the boxing public in 1994 with a win over the former Roberto Duran conqueror Kirkland Lang, whereafter the then-dubbed Catman went from strength to strength, winning 10 of his next 11 fights by knockout.
By the name of Glenn Catley, 22 years of age, he's 7-0 and he's been going very well.
After winning the British title in 1998, Catley jumped straight into a world title fight with fellow Brit Richie Woodhall.
European style, get this chance, having never fought at the weight. Glenn asked me.
Catley was only given 12 days notice for this contest, yet in the eyes of many, had done enough to win, but pulled the short straw against the judges, where even Woodhall himself later admitted that the challenger deserved the decision.
I won the fight, and I'm celebrating my family and friends around the audience. We've done it. 5 or 10 minutes later, we started hearing these little whispers circulating the ring.
Winner and still WBC.
All I say is Rich's arm went up, and Rich is a good friend. I think the word of him. His arm went up, but his head went down.
I thought it was a tremendous performance by Glenn Catley. Like, we all thought he was going to get stopped. I thought he was absolutely tremendous.
The dubious defeat did little harm in slowing Catley's momentum. Just 2 years later, he earned another title shot, this time against the undefeated German Marcus Beyer, who had recently captured the WBC strap for the man Catley couldn't officially best, Richie Woodhall.
Good shots from Catley. Picked that one well, didn't he? That left hook.
The fight was razor thin as the final bell approached, yet this time, Glenn didn't want to leave his fate in the hands of the judges.
This is the last round.
12th and final round for the WBC Super Middleweight Championship of the world. And Glenn Catley reaching out for what he hopes would be a night of destiny. And a huge right hand! And then a left puts fire down for only the second time in his career. And Glenn Catley is the new
perhaps, I should that when they go and get stuff, I can dig deep and I can pull it out in the end,
Catley proved once more that his power and will to win could be the deciding factor in a fight, even at the highest level. He was 27 years of age, champion of the world, in the prime of his life, not just physically but mentally. It was going to take a world-class performance from a world-class fighter to beat him. At least, that's how it appeared.
We made the decision then. The decision was made for me to make my first defense in South Africa.
On September 1st, 2000, Catley traveled 8,000 miles to Johannesburg, South Africa, to defend his title against a local hero and former lightweight champ, Dingaan Thobela.
So, Dingaan, congratulations on your win. It looks as though a world title fight is on the way for this young man.
Thobela was a class fighter in his day, with multiple wins over some of the sport's top competitors. He'd rightly earned his place as an African boxing legend, but his most significant feats were almost a decade old. By the year 2000, he was washed up at world level, and to make matters worse, drastically gaining weight, moving through 5 weight classes in just a few short years.
The support that I got from people, started from Soweto, then it grew nationally.
He had the pedigree and experience to draw an intrigued crowd for the Catley fight, but no one expected him to win. Just earn one last payday and then sail off into the sunset as a national boxing hero.
And the Dingaan Thobela fan club in full voice here inside the Big Top Arena, Carnival City. Well, as we expected, the champion has planted himself solidly in front of Thobela in the center of the ring.
Thobela left it late in the first round to land a single punch, but when he did, alarm bells rang for Catley and his team.
Nothing really to separate the two fighters in this opening round.
Good left hands coming down. Thobela, big right hand there from Dingaan Thobela. Question is enough to shade the round.
All right, you box him well. That's a good right hand to the body. Okay, he's got a good jab, hasn't he? Yeah, all right.
Catley proceeded to dominate the next few rounds, shifting his feet to create angles and land powerful, precise combinations.
Speed a punch, that's all he can do. Did you see an elbow going again? The referee hasn't picked it up. No, that's bad. That was a right hand, that caught the target.
With his back to the wall, all Thobela could do was land the odd shot to keep his chances alive, and he did so effectively, with his close to minimal output often wobbling the defending champion.
Good landing from Thobela.
That was a good right hand there by the Catley felt that one.
With a lengthy lead on the cards, all Catley had to do was close out the championship rounds without anything drastic happening.
More effective punches are coming from Thobela.
Thobela with right hand.
Stinging right hand.
That rocked Catley. And now the Rose looking for his opportunity right.
A late rally was always in the champ's repertoire, and he did, in fact, win the 11th round to add that little extra breathing space heading into the final stretch. Yet, midway through the last round, the effects of Thobela's power had taken Catley's legs away, and an experienced guy like Dingaan knew the time to pounce was now.
54 seconds left, John. Thobela, what a beautiful shot from Thobela!
Catley bravely made it back to his feet, but he was away with the fairies as Thobela moved in for the finish.
He's finished! He's gone! He's gone down! He's gone down! And he's a winner! Incredible! What a great victory! Unbelievable stuff here! A pandemonium stadium!
As I watched this back, I was really trying to pick up on any suspicious activity from Thobela or his team, and I didn't find much, and certainly nothing concrete. His team was perhaps acting somewhat weird as they tried to take his gloves off mere seconds after the victory, even during his initial celebration, but I could be reaching there. The footage then cut away to the replay of the knockout, and by the time the live feed was back, Thobela's gloves were off as he gallivanted around the ring, showing what appeared to be unusual-looking hand wraps, particularly in the knuckle area. When comparing his wraps with Catley's, it's clear they were very different. But again, I've seen a few fighters with wraps similar to these in my many years as a boxing fan. The rules regarding how the hand wrap should be applied lay with the commission, and that varies a great deal between different locations. Stacking wraps and gauze to create this mounted effect on the knuckles is usually against the rules, but I can't speak for how things were done in South Africa 20 plus years ago. As far as Catley was concerned though, there was something more sinister than gauze and tape lying beneath those wraps.
I know for a fact, and I will to the day I die, the bandage Thobela had on the night was loaded. He had something inserted in his bandage. We've proven it with forensics.
A few days after the fight, Catley scrutinized the fight film with his team and compiled a lowlight of clips that he felt, along with his own personal beliefs of being hit by a foreign object, proved that Thobela had cheated by using loaded gloves. He described the object as feeling like a glass ashtray or a mobile phone. The video Catley produced has never been available to the public, and I'm sure the resolution of the clips is much higher than the YouTube rip I've used in this video today, despite the fact that I've upscaled the footage. Instead of releasing the clips publicly, he took the evidence to the head of the WBC, Jose Suleiman, who, despite being on friendly terms with Thobela, deemed the bandages abnormal and granted Catley a rematch. For me, that was an admission of guilt from Suleiman. He may not have banned or even investigated the case further, but granting the rematch on the basis of the video evidence Catley provided gave weight to, quite honestly, the most heinous accusation a boxer can make. And why would the head of the WBC do that without concrete proof? Well, they could very well have been trying to save their own skin by glossing over the fact that Catley claimed no representative from the governing body was in the locker room to watch the fighters wrap their hands. Which, if Thobela did indeed load his gloves, the WBC, which is regarded as the most prestigious governing body in world boxing, could be held liable for an unprecedented and ugly lawsuit.
We were both left unattended in our changing rooms for a period of time, and I believe that's when his bandages were, altered.
Catley's claims of unsupervised preparation were given weight when Hussein Houchi, president of the African Boxing Union, admitted that by the time he had entered Thobela's locker room, his hands were already wrapped, and he just brushed it off by assuming the ref had taken care of it. And that's coming from the president of the ABU, a guy who would have an obvious case to favor Thobela.
His record, 40 wins, including 26 by knockout, 12 defeats.
The rematch with Thobela never materialized, as the South African was beaten in his first defense against Dave Hilton Jr., whereafter he went on a 7-fight losing streak until retirement in 2006. Glenn instead fought his old foe, Eric Lucas, who he had beaten a year prior in a rematch for the WBC super middleweight title. Whether it was Catley on the decline or just Lucas coming into his prime, the rematch went completely different as Catley was beaten up and knocked out inside 8 rounds.
The way and the manner in which I lost the title, you dedicate your life, well I did, I dedicated my life to boxing and I achieved, and I became WBC champion of the world. I lost it so controversially. After that fight, I've got to say it, I wasn't quite the same again.
Catley retired in 2007 after never being able to capture his form of old. He was in entertaining fights at a decent level to the end, but he's always stated that the Thobela fight was the final nail in his career coffin. After boxing, Catley went back to school and became a clinical therapist. He now travels the country providing lectures and motivational speeches to help further better communities and those in need. Which brings me on to Catley's character and whether we should believe or even entertain the idea that Dingaan cheated in such a way that would completely tarnish his legacy. I wasn't a close follower of Catley's career, so I can't from memory give you an honest opinion on whether he would lie, fabricate, or exaggerate his loss to Thobela. In all the interviews I've watched with him to research this video, he comes across as a good, decent guy that's humble and proud of what he achieved in his career. He never brings up the Thobela controversy unless someone asks him about it, which to me doesn't scream attention seeker or sore loser. However, history does show that boxers, particularly in their peak, struggle to deal with losses in strange ways.
And then when you ask about the gloves, well, you can't not see that.
Going from big wins on the world stage to losing to a guy everyone thinks you'll beat comfortably would be hard to accept. Delusion and even ignorance can seek in. Most of you will know about the recent madness with the Wilder-Fury situation, but Wilder isn't the only one to accuse his opponent of cheating in an attempt to save face.
I come home and I was angry for a long time. I figured I'd been betrayed by my managers. I'd been given things in my water to roast for loose. I had all the kind of excuses that filled me with hatred and revenge.
Roberto Duran, George Foreman, and Vladimir Klitschko all excused a loss by claiming they'd been poisoned. It can happen to the best of them. In Catley's case, I don't know what to believe. Thobela has never really commented on the situation. He just brushes it off as Glenn being a sore loser. The people of South Africa absolutely reject the idea that their hero, who they had witnessed achieve greatness over 2 decades in the sport, would ever attempt such a dirty trick. I guess it really all boils down to one man's word against the other, with a few low-resolution stills and circumstantial evidence as proof. I hope for Catley, and more importantly boxing's sake, that Dingaan's raps were legit. The thought of a boxer not only losing to loaded gloves, but then being silenced by the powers that be to save their own skin makes me question everything I know and love about this sport. What do you guys think? I'm no expert on Thobela or even Catley's career, so if anyone out there has anything to add to either guy's character, I'd love to read your thoughts in the replies. Until next time, this was BLTV After Dark.